New York City, February 8th, 1946. 11:30 p.m., Frank Costello received a phone call. Lucky Luciano. Wanted to meet. Tonight. Urgent. Private. Come alone. Costello arrived at Luciano's penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side at midnight. This wasn't unusual. They'd been working together for over 20 years. Business partners. Friends. Two of the most powerful men in American organized crime. But tonight felt different. Luciano was being deported to Italy in 2 days. February 10th. Government had finally succeeded in removing him permanently from the United States. This was goodbye. Luciano opened the door, looked tired, older than his 48 years, the stress of legal battles, the reality of deportation, the knowledge that he'd never return to America, never see New York again, never walk these streets where he'd built his empire. Frank, come in. The apartment was mostly packed, boxes everywhere, personal belongings being prepared for shipment, the dismantling of a life. Luciano led Costello to the study, one room that was still intact, still functional. Desk, chairs, and on the desk, a briefcase. Sit down, Frank. We need to talk about the future. Costello sat, waited. This conversation would determine everything. Luciano was leaving. Someone had to run New York, multiple families, competing interests, territorial disputes, political connections, law enforcement relationships. Everything that made organized crime in New York function required coordination, required leadership, required someone everyone could work with. The obvious choice was Frank Costello. He'd been Luciano's closest associate for decades. He understood the business, had relationships with everyone who mattered, was respected, was diplomatic, could maintain the peace that Luciano had established after years of bloody gang wars. But Luciano had doubts, not about Costello's intelligence, not about his connections, but about something more fundamental, something that would determine whether Costello could actually lead effectively for the next decade, or whether he'd make mistakes that would destroy everything. Frank, you know you're going to run things after I leave. I figured. But I need to know something first. I need to know if you have the discipline for it, the self-control, the ability to think long-term even when short-term pressures are overwhelming. Costello didn't respond, just listened. Luciano opened the briefcase. Inside was cash, stacks of $100 bills, neatly organized. There's $1 million here. Count it if you want. Costello looked at the money. What's this for? It's a test. I'm giving you this money. All of it. $1 million. It's yours. But there's one condition. You cannot touch it, cannot use it, cannot invest it, cannot spend a single dollar of it. For 1 year, exactly 1 year from tonight. February 8th, 1947. You keep this money locked away. Don't look at it. Don't think about it. Just let it sit. And if I do that, then New York is yours. Everyone will know you're my successor. Everyone will work with you. You'll have my full backing, my connections, my authority transferred to you. You'll run things the way we've always run things. Peacefully, profitably, intelligently. And if I touch the money before the year is up, then you get nothing. You go back to whatever you were doing before. Someone else runs New York. You'll have proven you don't have the discipline required to lead. Because if you can't resist using $1 million when it's sitting right in front of you, you can't resist the temptations that come with running this business. The money you could make by cutting corners. The risks you could take that seem profitable short-term, but are disasters long-term. The pressures that will make you want to do stupid things for quick solutions. Costello stared at the briefcase. This is really the test. Just don't touch money for a year. That's it. Simplest test in the world, and the hardest test in the world. Because I promise you, Frank, This year is going to be difficult. Things are going to go wrong. You're going to have problems. Financial problems. Operational problems. Legal problems. And every time something goes wrong, you're going to remember this briefcase. You're going to think, I have $1 million sitting in a safe. I could use it to fix this problem. I could solve this crisis right now. But you won't. You'll find another way. Because touching this money means you failed the test. What if there's an emergency? What if... No exceptions. Emergency? Crisis? Disaster? Doesn't matter. You don't touch this money. That's the rule. That's the test. Costello thought for a long moment. Why this test? Why not something else? Luciano leaned back. Because I've been watching men in this business for 30 years. And you know what separates the ones who last from the ones who end up dead or in prison? Discipline. Self-control. The ability to delay gratification. To think strategically instead of reactively. Most guys in this business are greedy. They see opportunity. They grab it. They see money. They take it. They see a problem. They solve it the easiest way possible regardless of long-term consequences. He pointed at the briefcase. This $1 million is going to sit there for a year, and it's going to test whether you're a leader or just another gangster. Leaders can wait. Leaders can resist temptation. Leaders can suffer through short-term difficulties without panicking. Gangsters can't. Gangsters see money and grab it. Gangsters face pressure and make stupid, desperate decisions. I need to know which one you are. You really think I might fail this test? I don't know. That's why it's a test. I think you're smart enough to succeed. But I've seen smart men fail simple tests because they couldn't control themselves. So we'll see. 1 year. Don't touch the money. Prove you can lead. Costello took the briefcase. $1 million. 1 year. One condition. Luciano was deported to Italy on February 10th, 1946. Left America. Never returned. Spent the rest of his life in Italy and Cuba. Died in 1962. But in February 1946, as he left New York for the last time, he left behind a test that would determine the future of organized crime in the city. Frank Costello took the briefcase home, put it in his personal safe, locked it, didn't count the money, didn't look at it, just locked it away, and tried to forget about it. The year that followed was exactly as difficult as Luciano had predicted. March 1946. Federal prosecutors indicted 3 of Costello's associates on racketeering charges. Legal defense would cost approximately $300,000. Costello had money, had cash reserves, but not as much as usual. The legal fees strained his resources, and in his safe, $1 million sat untouched. Money that could solve the problem immediately, money he couldn't use. He found other ways, borrowed from associates, negotiated payment plans with attorneys, sold some assets, handled it without touching the briefcase. June 1946. Territorial dispute with another family. Someone was operating gambling houses in areas Costello considered his territory. Traditional solution would be to buy them out, offer money, make a deal. Costello could offer maybe $200,000 from his available funds, but the other side wanted more. Wanted $500,000. In his safe, $1 million. More than enough to solve the problem peacefully. Money he couldn't touch. He negotiated, found compromises, split the territory differently, made deals that didn't require huge cash payments, handled it without touching the briefcase. September 1946. Police corruption costs increased. New administration. New police commissioner who was less cooperative, more expensive to maintain the protection that kept operations running smoothly. Costello needed to approximately double his monthly payments to police and politicians. Money was tight. Cash flow was strained. In his safe, $1 million. Could cover police payments for years. Money he couldn't use. He raised prices, increased revenue from gambling operations, found efficiencies, cut costs elsewhere. Handled it without touching the briefcase. December 1946, personal crisis. Costello's brother had medical emergency, needed expensive surgery. Hospital wanted payment up front, $60,000. Costello's brother was family. This was personal, not business. Surely this qualified as emergency. Surely Luciano would understand using the money for family medical crisis. In his safe, $1 million. More than enough to save his brother. Money he couldn't touch. He mortgaged his house, borrowed against future gambling revenues, collected debts people owed him, scraped together the $60,000, paid for his brother's surgery, handled it without touching the briefcase. Every month brought new problems, new pressures, new situations where having access to $1 million would have made things easier. Would have solved problems immediately, would have reduced stress and difficulty. And every month, Costello resisted, didn't open the safe, didn't look at the money, didn't touch the briefcase. His associates noticed he was struggling financially, wondered why. Frank Costello, one of the richest criminals in New York, suddenly scrambling for cash, taking loans, selling assets, living less lavishly than before. Some people thought he was losing money, thought his businesses were failing, thought maybe he wasn't the leader everyone believed he was. But Costello said nothing, didn't explain, didn't defend himself, just kept working, kept solving problems, kept running operations, and kept the briefcase locked in his safe untouched. February 8th, 1947. Exactly 1 year after Luciano had given him the test, Costello opened his safe. Took out the briefcase. For the first time in 12 months, he opened it. The money was still there. Every dollar. 1 million. Untouched. Exactly as Luciano had left it. Costello had succeeded. Passed the test. Proven he had the discipline Luciano required. Proven he could resist temptation even under extreme pressure. Proven he was a leader. He made arrangements to travel to Havana, Cuba, where Luciano was living temporarily. Meeting was set for February 15th, 1947. Private. Just the two of them. Costello would return the money, report that he'd completed the test, receive Luciano's formal blessing as New York's leader. The meeting took place at Luciano's Havana residence, private villa, expensive, isolated. Costello arrived carrying the briefcase. Luciano greeted him, looked healthier than he had a year ago. Life in exile suited him better than the stress of running New York. They sat in Luciano's study. Costello placed the briefcase on the desk. 1 year, as instructed. I didn't touch it, not once. Every dollar is still there. Luciano opened the briefcase, looked at the money, counted a few stacks. Then he smiled. Not a happy smile. Something else. Something knowing. Frank, I need to tell you something. This money, it's counterfeit. Costello stared. What? Every bill in this briefcase. Fake. Counterfeit. Not real money. Worthless. I printed it myself. Well, I had it printed. Good quality counterfeits. Good enough to pass visual inspection. But if you tried to spend any of it, you would have been caught immediately. Arrested. Prosecuted. Destroyed. Costello's face went through several emotions. Shock. Confusion. Anger. Then something else. Understanding. The whole test. The money wasn't real? The money wasn't real. But the test was completely real. Frank, if you'd used that money, if you'd taken even $1 out of that briefcase to solve your problems this year, you would have destroyed yourself. You would have been caught passing counterfeit bills. You would have gone to federal prison. You would have lost everything. and I would have known you failed the test. So the test wasn't about discipline. It was about whether I'd destroy myself. It was about both. The money being fake was insurance. If you failed the discipline test, if you couldn't resist temptation, you would have also failed the survival test. You would have proven you make impulsive decisions without checking details. You would have used money without verifying it was real. That kind of carelessness gets people killed in this business. Luciano stood up, walked to his desk, pulled out another envelope, handed it to Costello. This is real. $100,000. Real money. Compensation for the difficulty of this year, and acknowledgement that you passed the test. You have the discipline to lead. You have the caution to verify before acting. You have the strength to suffer through difficulties without making desperate decisions. New York is yours, Frank. Run it well. Costello looked at the envelope, then at the briefcase full of fake money, then at Luciano. If I'd failed, if I'd used the money and gotten arrested, you would have just let me go to prison? Yes, because if you were stupid enough to use money without verifying it first, if you were impulsive enough to solve problems with mysterious cash that appeared in your life, then you weren't smart enough to run New York. And I'd rather you learn that lesson by going to prison than by getting yourself and everyone around you killed later. That's cold. That's leadership. I gave you a test that revealed everything about whether you could actually do this job. You passed. Most people would have failed. They would have used the money, would have gotten arrested, would have proven they weren't ready to lead. You didn't. You suffered through the difficult year. You found legitimate solutions to your problems. You proved you can think strategically even under pressure. That's why New York is yours. Frank Costello returned to New York, never spoke publicly about the test. Never told associates about the counterfeit money. Just quietly took over leadership, ran the commission, coordinated the 5 families, maintained the peace, built relationships with politicians and police that kept operations running smoothly. He led for over a decade, through the late 1940s and the entire 1950s, became known as the Prime Minister of the Underworld, the most powerful organized crime figure in America. Never arrested on major charges, never imprisoned. Survived assassination attempts, retired in the early 1960s. Died in 1973 at age 82. Wealthy, free, successful. Everything Luciano had predicted. In 1972, a journalist interviewed Costello for a book about organized crime. Asked about his relationship with Lucky Luciano, whether Luciano had chosen him as successor, how that transition had worked. Costello was careful, didn't reveal details that could be used legally against anyone still alive. But he did tell one story. Lucky gave me a test in 1946. Right before he was deported, he wanted to know if I could lead, if I had the discipline, the self-control, the long-term thinking. The test was simple but very hard, and I passed. That's how I became the guy who ran things after Lucky left. What was the test? Can't tell you details, but I'll tell you what I learned from it. The test wasn't really about what it appeared to be about. It was about something deeper, about character, about whether I would check details before acting, about whether I could suffer through difficulty without panicking, about whether I understood that some opportunities are actually traps. That's what Lucky was testing, and I'm glad I passed. Because if I'd failed, I would have destroyed myself. Lucky gave me a gift by testing me. He showed me what I was capable of. Did you resent the test? Did it seem unfair? At the time, yes. It was a very difficult year. I had problems that would have been easy to solve if I'd had access to resources that seemed available. But looking back, no. I don't resent it. Lucky did exactly what a good mentor should do. He created a situation that revealed whether I was ready for responsibility. And he made sure that if I wasn't ready, I'd find out in a way that taught me something, rather than just killing me or sending me to prison. That's wisdom. That's leadership. The story of the counterfeit million didn't become public until after Costello died in 1973. His executor found the briefcase in his personal safe, still there, never thrown away. Never destroyed, kept as a reminder. The bills were examined, all counterfeit, all printed in early 1946. Good quality for the time, but obviously fake to any expert. Costello had kept them for 26 years, a reminder of the test he'd passed, the year he'd suffered through, the discipline he'd proven. Lucky Luciano's final test for Frank Costello. $1 million in counterfeit bills. 1 year of forbidden access. One condition that revealed everything about whether Costello could actually lead. The money was fake. The test was real. The lesson was priceless. Frank Costello passed because he understood something most people don't understand. That the easiest solution is often a trap. That money that appears when you need it most is usually too good to be true. That real leadership means suffering through difficulties honestly, rather than taking shortcuts that seem convenient, but are actually catastrophic. For 1 year, Costello struggled financially, borrowed money, sold assets, made sacrifices, all while $1 million sat in his safe. Money he couldn't use, didn't know was fake, didn't know would destroy him if he touched it. And that discipline, that self-control, that ability to suffer through hardship without taking the easy path, that's what made him worthy of leading New York's organized crime for over a decade. Lucky Luciano knew what he was doing. He'd given Costello a test that was impossible to fake. Either you have discipline or you don't. Either you can resist temptation or you can't. Either you verify details before acting or you don't. The counterfeit money revealed all of that. And Costello had proven himself worthy. February 8, 1946, the night Lucky Luciano gave Frank Costello $1 million in counterfeit bills and told him not to touch it for a year. The night that determined who would run New York. The night that tested whether Costello was a leader or just another gangster. Costello passed. The money was fake, but his leadership was real. And for 27 years, until his death in 1973, Frank Costello kept that briefcase of counterfeit money as a reminder of the year he'd proven himself worthy. The test that looked like it was about discipline, but was actually about survival. The money that looked real, but was actually a trap. The year that looked like torture, but was actually preparation. Lucky Luciano's final gift to Frank Costello. A test that revealed everything, and a lesson that lasted a lifetime. Don't grab opportunities without verifying them first. Don't solve problems with resources you haven't verified. Don't let short-term pressure make you take long-term risks. 1 million counterfeit dollars. 1 year of discipline. 1 successor proven worthy. That's how Lucky Luciano chose the man who would run New York after he was gone. Not with violence, not with competition, but with a test so clever that failing it meant destroying yourself. And Frank Costello passed because he had exactly what Luciano was looking for. The discipline to wait, the caution to avoid traps, the strength to suffer through difficulty without making desperate decisions. That's leadership. That's why Costello succeeded where others failed. That's why he survived when most gangsters died young or spent their lives in prison. 1 year, 1 test, 1 briefcase full of fake money that revealed who was real,